Great. Thanks, Scott. Um, I'm excited to be here again. And our topic today kind of hit me like a lightning bolt last night. I may not have it refined enough. So we may do some follow up on this, kind of depending on what questions we get and how I gauge um, this is getting internalized. Um, I don't normally cover a lot about abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, or otherwise, but it really does need to have a light shined on it. Um, there's a lot of different, I guess, theories out there, stances out there, and I am not going to make a referendum on whether or not sexual addiction is inherent abuse or not. I think that's covered well in other places. I want to look more at some very basic relationship interactions that I think can come up a lot in early recovery or even long-term relationships that need to have some light shed on them. It's my belief that abusive behavior can come from both intentional and unintentional places. And that is not at all to condone or justify. Abuse is abuse, and there's never an excuse for it. There's never it's never okay. But what I've noticed with a lot of couples, a lot of clients that I work with is the allegation or the concern about abuse will come up. And the couple just does not know, or the individual does not know how to handle it in any way that's not defensive. And so my hope today is that I can give you some internal calibrations, some questions to ask yourself about your behavior if your partner says that's abusive or that feels manipulative or that feels punishing is another word that will come up a lot. Because I think the self-reflection, if anybody is saying that feels unfair or that's cruel or that's punishing, I really think those ought to be words and situations in a relationship that throw on the brakes for whoever is hearing it or saying it. Because it's pretty serious. Um, Anything short of stopping and starting to evaluate your behavior seriously is a stranglehold on an already injured relationship. I wouldn't say it's adding insult to injury, it's adding fatal injury to injury and insult. And so I want to present a way that either partner, whether you are in addiction recovery or whether you've been betrayed, I think everybody is susceptible to doing these behaviors. Everybody's susceptible to experiencing these behaviors. And I want to provide a way that you can calibrate to how punishing or abusive your behavior might be. Another way of putting that is I want to give some ways to calibrate to help you move beyond defensiveness if you hear this from your partner and move into self-reflection and help and accountability. I don't know of any happy long-term relationships where abuse is a part of it. Not to dredge up anything that might be triggering. I didn't follow this closely either, but you look at the recent civil trial between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And one of the things that whoever the professional was that helped him is they said this was an abusive relationship and both parties were guilty. That was not a relationship from the outside that anybody ever looked at and was like, man, they are just so happy and that looks so great. Like it was a show and terrible. And so again, I want to provide a way that that dynamic doesn't just have to ride, or we have to have this like uncomfortable stony silence. Or as a guy from my group said last night as we were talking about this, he said in the past when my wife would bring that up, all I could do and what I gave her in response was at least 3 days of silence, which in and of itself I would say is abusive and punishing. So here's some things to look at. And of course, this is not an exhaustive list. Like I said, this is kind of a new way of thinking about this for me. And so there can be more to be added. But number one, a lot of the folks that I work with, not a surprise to any of you who are either an addict in recovery or the partner of an addict in recovery. A lot of the folks that I work with, they use alone time and withdrawing to set things right. I do not think that there is anything inherently pathological about preferring time by yourself or even needing time disconnected to regroup. I think that can actually be a really powerful tool if it's done right. So some things to look at: when you seek alone time, are you daring your partner to follow you? So in other words, I'm going to take a time out and just see what happens if you try to come after me, or just see what happens if you, so is there threat? Is there menacing in the way that you take alone time? When you are seeking a break this I think would be a good thought experiment to look at how calibrated you are to my aloneness is about punishing and exclusion, not really about regulating myself. Would you be just as open to when you know, for example, you and your partner are having a conversation about finances and you're feeling flooded and you are noticing, I'm not tracking what my partner is saying, I'm starting to feel angry, and you say, I need a timeout, I can't do this, would you be just as open to your partner saying, that's a good idea, why don't we take a walk for a while and not talk about this? Because that can be good regulation as well. In fact, if there is an ability for co-regulation over solo regulation, co-regulation tends to work better and deeper and have longer lasting effects. So if you're in a place where co-regulation is awful to you and you don't see a way to do it, or you are actively resisting a good offer for that, you might be, gosh, now I feel like Jeff Foxworthy, you might be abusive, you might be punishing. Another thing to look at is when you go and have alone time, are you using that to really attend to neurological needs? Are you regrouping? Are you grounding? Are you taking a break from the perseverating in your brain, hashing out the conversation? Or in other words, are you taking the break to come back more fully loaded with ammunition? Or are you taking the break in order to disarm and take out the combat you have in you? Because that kind of pulling back and regrouping for your next attack. The Gottmans actually studied this in their love lab. They had very chilling video of what they called pit bulls versus vipers when it comes to domestic abuse. Pit bulls will lean forward, they'll put their head forward, and it's just aggressive out of the gate. And that's terrifying, that's scary. Even more scary is the viper, who they showed videos of, and you literally see the person who was doing the abusing doing this kind of movement and like averting gaze and then locking into the target and striking like a snake. So is the withdrawal about gathering and planning your next strike? If so, that's abusive, that's punishing. The example came up in our group last night. Are you taking a break, or are you seeking withdrawal because there's a biological need? In other words, flooding is neurological. That's not a choice we make. It's not I can't hear this in the sense of I prefer not to. It's literally like my body is shutting down. Are you taking a break in the way that you would excuse yourself to go to the bathroom? Even if you were in a enjoyable bonding conversation with your spouse and the need hit you? Or are you doing it like a child? Are you asking for permission? Are you throwing that around as a weapon? Are you able to say, I can't listen right now, I'm not in a good place, I need to go get right and I'll be back? Give me a moment, I need to take care of some things and I'll be back with you. Another thing to look at is your motivation. So is any of your motivation or satisfaction in dealing with your partner tied to your partner's pain or discomfort? And I say any because I still think it's abusive or punishing to say, well, no, the main thing is I want blah, blah, blah. But there is a little part of me that, really likes to see this pain, or I'm glad that my partner is hurting. Any of that motivation is at the very least going to open the door to abuse and punishment, which again is not fair. It's not secure functioning. It's not good for either party. So if any of your thoughts are, now you know how it feels, how do you like that? You're not in a good place. I wrote down here, are you Batmaning? Those of you who follow the Batman saga, you know that there's this underlying, like, how appropriate is it for somebody to take justice into their own hands and to become a vigilante? And you see this part of Batman that sometimes resists the going and fighting crime part, and another time says, I am justice, I am vengeance. If you're Batmaning, I am judge, jury, and executioner, you are probably being abusive and punishing. So check those motivations. If you are trying to right a wrong in the stead of the universe, you are taking on too much power and you're not going to wield it well. If any kind of karmic thing needs to happen, if you believe in that, leave that up to the powers of the universe. Don't take that into your own hands. Another calibrating thing, are you shirking any solo or joint responsibilities as a way to communicate your displeasure, or as a way to, are you indulging in feelings that have you backing off from joint or solo responsibilities? So another way of looking at this, let's say you and your partner are in an argument and you're upset with your partner, and you storm out of the house to leave your partner to attend to the duties of the evening with the children all by themselves and without their consent. Now, I totally get reaching your limit. I totally get, not being able to stick around. But secure functioning couples can say, I need a break. Can you cover what's happening here? And that can actually be a beautiful way to support each other. Stranding your partner, leaving your partner, speeding off in the car because you had a argument in public and you're upset, that's abusive, that's punishing. Anything that comes from the victim chair. Those of you that are familiar with the Cartman triangle, the drama triangle, the victim chair is where we feel small. We can only tell the story from a narrative of where there's a big, bad, wrong monster. And either the explicit or implicit story about us is, I did nothing wrong. Another way that I see this come up is when partners start asking each other for permission. Can I talk? Can I take a break? That's victim chair stuff that's coming up from underneath. The non-victim chair way to assert yourself is, I have some things to say. I would like to talk. I'm going to be taking a break. Here's what I'm going to do. I will be coming back. Even, would you like to join me? Can we cool off on this? Stories that make your partner a monster are a decent indication that you may be in the victim chair. And it's not that, don't get me wrong, victimization happens. But a narrative that only paints you as a victim, I think, opens the door to unfair behavior at the best, unfair responses, and of course, abusive and punishing at the worst. So you really have to watch for how you narrate. My partner never lets me, or my partner has to be in charge, or I can't because my partner. You have to be careful. I'm not saying that that's a clear sign that you are being abusive or that there's a tendency, but you have to be careful about how far you take that. Because if your agency and your free will, the way you see that, only lies in the hands of your partner, you've diminished yourself in many cases inappropriately. So you really have to watch for that ability to hold your own adult space and make your own choices. And also to be able to tolerate people being disappointed or upset with what you're doing, and that being okay, not because you don't care, but because you understand this is disappointing, this is upsetting, that's not my intention to make you feel that way, but I understand why you do. I couldn't think of a better way to say this, but non-permeable interaction space, or you could say rigidity or inflexibility, is something you have to check for. So I'll often see in the couples that I work with, when this topic comes up, generally this is female to male, with a lot of the couples that I work with, female saying, you're being unfair, you're being abusive, what you're doing is punishing, and the male partner just putting up a brick wall. When there is no permeability, when there is no, well, tell me what you mean by that, or what are you doing, or could you give me some examples, with curiosity, not again in a challenging pit bull kind of way, but that permeability, okay, I'll consider that, or let me take a look at that. Because what happens when you set up a brick wall is you can induce your partner to start battering harder and harder and harder. And then it's understandable that for a partner who's had to push so hard to get this heard or seen, once they break through the wall, they flood through with a bunch. And then you'll jump back, or the male will jump back, or partner B will jump back and say, see, you're just ready to pile on me. And they're missing the way that they set that up. Because I was, you could call it stubborn, impermeable, inflexible, because I was inflexible, I induced my partner to a more and more extreme buildup. And now I feel justified in my extreme responses. Well, you're not. Again, when your partner speaks up and says, hey, this feels abusive, or this feels punishing to me, you must stop and evaluate your behavior seriously. Anything short of that is perpetuating a cycle where two people can get closer and closer to the conclusion, well, I have to do what I want, or I have to do what's right for me here, and screw you, I'm not thinking about you anymore. One last, and this is kind of the catch-all, I think these are the obvious things that of course, a lot could be said about and has been, but I won't elucidate these further. If you have any intimidation, threat, cutting words, turning feelings into weapons, exploiting vulnerabilities, or weaponizing your partner's past disclosures. Yeah, well, I'm not the one who, or yeah, you're going to do with me just like you did with your sister, or whatever that is. That kind of unfair hitting below the belt, taking something that was given in confidence and in trust, and then turning that into a weapon. That is abusive, and that is punishing. Using your physical stature, your tone of voice, implied or real threat, all of that is abusive and punishing. Actually, a lot of the men that I work with, we have to work on a softening in their face. Again, not because many of them don't intend to be threatening individuals, but it's so set in them. We actually have to work on softening because there's a lot of fear and terror that is injected into the relationship, just through that physical, tensing up, or that physical lowering, intimidation. And I would just, in closing, I would say, as you go through this self-assessment, if that accusation or that issue comes across the plate, if you go through this self-assessment and any of these are happening, get accountable at the very least. This is good stuff to take to a meeting. This is good stuff to take to your therapist. This is good stuff to journal about. This is good stuff to talk to your sponsor about. This is good stuff to circle back and talk with your spouse about. You know what? I was thinking about what you said the other night about how I was yelling, and there definitely is a change in my voice. And I don't think that's coming from an empowered place. So accountability is the first step. Making it real, dropping the denial defense, or the defense, dropping that and getting curious, again, going into that middle space in the relationship, and seriously evaluating your own behavior. That's a much more powerful way to be able to move forward, rather than, I guess I have to take my partner's word for it. I don't see it, but I guess I have to do what you say. That's victim stuff. That does not advance the cause. But seriously looking at your part, no matter how big or small you think it is, seriously looking at that and becoming accountable is, a first step in hopefully being able to change any abusive or punishing dynamics.
Thank you, Jon. Your video has frozen, but we've been able to hear you just
Oh
fine. So
no,
no, that's
that
all
means
right. We can
that
hear
means
you just
my
fine.
Zoom might crash soon. So if I
All right.
fall off, I'll get back on quick.
Okay. No worries. So just a reminder to everybody, the topic today is abuse in relationships, and Jon very specifically stated we're not addressing whether the addiction itself is abusive. There's debate about that both ways. This is more about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jon, but how we're relating to each other right now on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
I would say a much more I hate to use a superlative here, but a much more insidious form of abuse is the stuff we allow to happen every day
Yeah,
that erodes and poisons at a very deep level.
yeah. Um, thank you for clarifying. You also mentioned that there can be, oops, we lost Jon. Hi, everybody. I am not an expert on this topic, so hopefully he will be back very quickly. Um, so, um, yeah, um, let's give him about 30 seconds here. I apologize, but the internet does what it does. And then I have one quick question for Jon, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. Or I'll do my best with the Q&A. All right. Okay, well, let's jump into the Q&A. I'll do my best with it to carry it until Jon gets back. How about that? I have noticed that my sex addict, porn addict's daughter displays a lot of mini wife syndrome type behaviors. And while he has virtually no empathy for me, he seemingly has an endless empathy for her. Um, is this a type of enmeshment? How do I help him see the permissive parenting is not good for any of us, especially her? We're going to hold that one for Jon because Jon is an enmeshment expert. Okay, next question. And I promise we will come back to that first one because it's a great question. I am a betrayer, and see he's back in yet, not yet. I'm a betrayer, see my actions as abusive. How do I learn to see and value my partner after devaluing her so much? I struggle to, there's Jon, yay. Okay, you back. Unmute, unmute.
I swear I have the only computer in the world that Zoom crashes daily on.
Oh,
Everybody else
mine,
is something so
mine
reliable.
freezes a lot. So, I was just going to jump into the questions, and I read the first one. I was like, "Oh God, we need Jon for this one." So I'll read it again. Okay, so I have noticed that my sex addict, porn addict husband's, I assume, daughter displays a lot of mini wife syndrome type behaviors. And while he has no empathy for me, he has seemingly endless empathy for her. Is this a type of enmeshment? How do I help him see that this permissive parenting is not good for any of us, especially her?
Yeah, I'm guessing with the complexity of this question, there's a lot more that could be said, and there's a lot more that needs to be described. I don't know what mini wife syndrome means. I mean, I could assume, but we'd want to see specific. What I'd want to know about specific, and this is not the format for me to get into diagnosing that. I'll just say a word here about conditional versus unconditional love. So, one way to look at this from a parent to a child, I really think there ought to be an endless well of patience and compassion. Like, kids did not ask to get born. Parents make that decision. And I think in that way, we owe our kids unconditional love. That is the only relationship that I think unconditional love and unconditional compassion make sense in. Every other adult relationship is pay to play. There it is conditional. That is not to say if your spouse is not giving you compassion that whatever BS story they make up about why you don't deserve it is true. So the short answer is I don't know what is going on there. There can certainly be some behaviors of a parent toward a child you know, in parentifying or talking with them about adult things, or, you know, bringing in complaints about the spouse, or, you know, lavishing attention on a child that is more appropriate to lavish on a spouse. That all is, you know, concerning and enmeshing, but the only factor that was defined there was empathy and compassion, and that's not by itself necessarily something that means there's something wrong. It can actually mean there's something very right, but we need more information. If you are interested in talking through that specific situation, and even if your spouse is interested in looking at that specific situation, I do consultations. I can do a limited consultation and looking at specific items like that, where we can not only get to the bottom of what might be going on, but make some plans for something healthier going forward.
Yeah, you can find Jon at White Pine Recovery if you want to set that up. Yeah, and I'll just add something that I think you've said before, Jon. I probably heard it from you. Is, you know, ideally a parent exists to meet the needs of the child. Mm-hmm. When a parent starts using the child to meet the parent's needs, then we have a real problem. So yeah. So.
Yeah, a real problem for everybody. I mean, first and foremost, the child, who is given a responsibility that they have no power, and also a real bad thing for the parent, because children can't solve adult problems.
Okay, I'm a betrayer and see my actions as abusive. How do I learn to see and value my partner after devaluing her so much? I struggle to remain present and empathetic with her when she is triggered. She has been very kind, loving, and empathetic throughout the betrayal process, and I have continued to lie and have struggled with consistent emotional nurturance. She says things like, when discovery happened, you discarded me and you are not seeing me or loving me. And it looks like that was going to continue, but didn't. So thoughts, Jon?
I'll just say I love that setup. I recognize that I've done this and I want to do something different. So often what I'll see the struggle in being present for my partner when they're triggered. There can be all sorts of you know, complicated or complex explanations of that. I think it often comes down to an inability to stay regulated when your partner is in distress, which is, you know, go figure, that's hard for a lot of folks who struggle with addiction to do, is to, you know, self-regulate. That's why we have addictions, because it's this thing outside of me that, you know, keeps it all humming inside. So focus on things that can help you stay self-regulated. Learn how to breathe, learn how to identify your own triggers, learn how to tolerate distress, learn how to ground externally. So, you know, as your partner's talking to you about difficult things, notice how their mouth moves, notice how they're breathing, notice textures on clothing, notice what their eyes are doing. You know, count squares in the room, count triangles in the room, notice different colors. Like, there's all sorts of things that we can do to take the edge off of our raw distress that help us to stay more present. One way of looking at behavior that gets punishing or abusive, it's when I have dangled at the end of my rope and I just can't take it anymore, so now I'm lashing out. The best way, I would say, to prevent that is to not dangle at the end of your rope, not get there. Address the distress earlier on. There were some multiple parts that, Scott. Usually I have the question up, but now I'm on a different.
I think you addressed it, but I'm going to pick a little bit. So if that's right. So you mentioned earlier intentional versus non-intentional forms of abuse. It seems to me that when we're dangling at the end of our rope and we get self-defense is when we engage in this non-intentional abusive behaviors.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what's happening here, certainly from the question. You know, he's continuing to lie. He's struggling with nurturance. She feels discarded, that he's not seeing her and loving her. You know, one of the things I want to ask you about it and sort of suggest is, because I know you have a men's group like last night, I suspect you spend a lot of time on issues just like this.
Yeah.
We have an online Out of the Doghouse work group that goes along with Dr. Rupp's book. In January, I'll be teaching a healthy intimacy and sexuality work group that's going to be more about emotional connection than anything else. You know, Doghouse is about empathy more than anything else. I found it helpful to be in a setting with other men who were struggling with the same thing at the same time. Is that something you agree with? Would you suggest, yeah, let's get you a group where you can talk about
Yeah.
this with other men and maybe with a
Oh,
some sort of guide?
oh, definitely. As long as the culture of the group is not to talk about how crazy our spouses are, but to focus on our own behavior and our own feelings. So just a word about empathy. Empathy is a skill set, not a feeling. So oftentimes I'll see with men in a similar position. You need to have phrases and you need to have strategies in your back pocket that function almost like a back brace. This gets me to right alignment, and of course I have to work on the internal strengthening and correcting things, but some things that get you into right alignment. I'll just share here, given the tone today, I feel a little bit bad about saying this because it's silly, but I had a professor in my undergrad degree who said there's really only 3 stages of change, and this is all you need to know about it. He says there's poopers, wipers, and get off the potters. And he says you have to know the stage of change that the people are in who you're helping, otherwise you get crap all over everybody. And so one way that I look at triggers, and this is not putting down partners at all, it's a mnemonic for conceptualizing this the right way. Being triggered is pooping. It is not about anything besides there's something inside of me that I have to get out. So how do you support a pooper? You can say things like, man, that really stinks. That looks so hard. I am so sorry. I hope you can get through this. Oh, that looks like it hurts. That attitude can actually go a long way with someone who's struggling. I often make the mistake in my personal life of I mistake pooping for wiping, and I jump in and start offering solutions. And oftentimes the reaction I get is, what are you doing? Stop that. And that's the right feedback. Even again, sorry to further the metaphor, I have toddlers in my house and kids, so this is like what we talk about all the time. But I remember potty training one of my boys, and the toilet was big and scary. And so when he was pooping, you would hold his hand. And that brought some comfort. So I would say like some skills, some setups, some phrases that help you to remember that initially getting through the trigger is not about squashing it, it's about joining with. You're safe to do this here. I'm watching. I'm so sorry this is hard. I'm sorry for causing this. You're not initially in getting through the trigger, you're not making it go away. You're showing I'm committed to being with you through this. I'm not going to abandon you again.
What is the get off the pot part?
So that's when you have purged what you need to, you've cleaned up, and you say, you know what, I'm ready to focus on other things in my life. That's the fun stage of change, where we can say, not every problem or issue we have is about this. Let's go build a life together.
Okay, cool. Just so you know, my day is totally made right now. I am just so happy that we had this come up.
Well, I have to give credit where credit is due. I know. So my professor was Steve Behill. I learned to love social work from him, and that is totally a Steveism.
It's a good one. Okay, next question here. My sex addict has been formally diagnosed as an addict. Internet search seems to indicate pretty low level of success with treatment, and my sex addict is 50 years into addiction. Our relationship has always had intimacy, hugging, spooning, kind words, but not sex. Obviously, discovery explained why that was. I'm feeling like I would be able to survive repeated relapses if we restarted sexual intimacy after many years. Why not just let sex addict be sex addict, since it was patterned through the entire marriage, rather than expose myself to recurring trauma episodes? I feel like that would minimize pain. The sex addict is not resisting counseling or treatment, but with this deep of an addiction daily for many years, recovery for sex addiction seems rare. And I'd rather deal with the acting out than have a new plan that gets continuously violated. Interesting take.
Yeah.
I'd rather just let him be a sex addict if we could just restart a little bit of more intimacy, and including sexual intimacy, in the marriage. Thoughts? And by the way, 50 years into the addiction, can you heal?
Yeah, that actually, I actually really love this question. I think that angle is so interesting. I'll just say, at the outset, a recovery, a setting a new expectation, let's do things a different way, or let me get more specific about saying we won't do this and we'll only do this. That is so hard. That is monumental. And when I'm working with couples, I always tell them, I wouldn't blame either one of you if at the outset or at any point somebody said, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, because this is really hard, and it does up the level of vulnerability. I will say, from a secure functioning standpoint, as long as both parties have consented to the relationship as is, as long as there are rules that we both play by. So what I'm hearing in here, and this may not be right for everybody, probably not right for everybody, but can be right for some. As long as there's rules that we play by, if you're going to use this, if you're going to relapse, you need to tell me. We need to be honest about this. Or I don't want to know anything about it. Just don't bring it home, or whatever that is. As long as it's an agreement made mutually, relationships can look all sorts of different ways. That maybe some of the difficulty you might run into is, I could do this if there was more intimacy. The mirror image of sex addiction is anorexia. So it may be hard to get around the anorexia without treating the addiction. And that would be the thing that I would look at in there and say, that there's complicated factors to look at there. But I want to reaffirm, because I think this is the spirit of the question. Everybody has a right to self-determine what they will and won't do, and how they will and won't do things in their relationship. And I would encourage the transparency. I would encourage the collaboration in your coupleship. Yeah, I'll say this above all else. Make that first and foremost, so that you two can find the best way forward for you.
Yeah. Look, I have some good friends. They've been together for a long time, and they have an open relationship. It's just an open relationship. What they do not ever do is keep anything secret. And Dr. Rob talks about it, Jon, you talk about it. It's the loss of relationship trust that does the most relational damage. It's less about looking at porn or going to a strip club, and more about all the lies and secrets. If I can't trust you to tell me the truth about sex, what can I trust you with? So asking for honesty is very reasonable, and you can set sexual boundaries, sexual and romantic boundaries. Every relationship, no relationship should have the same boundaries that their parents had. I mean, they're all just different. We all want different things. We all relate to each other differently. We all have different needs. And in this question, you kind of stated what your needs are. I want some intimacy, and I just need some. No judgments on that. I mean, more power to you for recognizing what your needs really are. But I do want to say, just because you've been a sex addict for 50 years doesn't mean you can't get sober, heal, recover, change. I've had guys in my porn addiction group in their mid-80s who made significant changes, and were incredibly grateful for it. So yeah, age is not a factor here, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm glad you're.
Yeah, the days of thinking that the brain doesn't grow new brain cells past whatever age, I mean, those are far, far in the rearview mirror.
Right.
We know the brain remains plastic and moldable, and change is neurologically possible at any age.
Yeah. Hi, can you clarify what the impermeable personal space was? There you go, Jon. You knew.
So I would say, let me think of a better way. When I am not open to feedback, when I do not think that there is any validity outside of my own thoughts. So permeable personal space is when my partner says something to me, whether I like it or not, there's a part of me that can say, I wonder if there's anything to that at the very least. So it's the complete inflexibility. If you're saying things that I don't like or things that I don't already, see about myself, it doesn't fly, not going to work. Like that sets up a dynamic that just encourages both parties to bulk up and get harder and more aggressive with each other. That place inside of you that can, at the very least say, I'm not sure about that. Let me think about it, and I'll get back to you. That's what I'm talking about the permeable interpersonal space.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times when we see this brick wall get thrown up is, my betrayed partner comes to me and said, Scott, you have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on strippers and prostitutes, money that was earmarked for the kids' college fund. I need full transparency with all of our finances. And I immediately go, but I've always handled it. We have plenty of blah, 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 blah. I throw up the wall. Instead of listening to you, like, you don't feel safe right now, understanding why you're asking for this boundary. I need full transparency, A, so I know we're not going to go broke, B, so I know you're not still cheating on me, and C, probably because I need it anyway. Maybe we should do some planning together to get fully back on our feet. I mean, it's a very reasonable request, but me being me, I'm gonna throw the wall up. I watched my mother and father. My mother had no idea what the finances were when he died in his 80s because he would never tell her. He wasn't cheating on her. He just wouldn't tell her. He threw the wall up.
Always. And sometimes at a bare minimum, I'll confess, I've used this personally myself. I am sorry you're with someone who is so dense. Like, can you explain that again? Or can you explain that in a different way? Like, I'm having a hard time understanding where you're coming from.
Is it okay, Jon, to say, I really would like to know why this is so important to you? Is it okay to ask that question?
Oh, absolutely. Tone is everything with that question, though, because you must justify turns this into a court of law, which nobody wants to have a relationship in, versus I want to understand. Can you explain to me, please? That can actually be a really supportive draw out. Say more about that. Tell me, I want to know where your flag is, what you're thinking behind this. Not so that I can double check it to make sure it's right, but I think it's a good exercise on a regular basis in your relationship to jump in the cockpit of your partner's life and just see, what are they seeing? What are they feeling? What are they experiencing? What does the world mean to them?
Yeah. And this takes us back to empathy again. And, we throw the wall up when we feel challenged. At least as an addict, that's when I throw it up. I get defensive. And it is, empathy is a learned skill. Just stopping the throwing up of the wall and stopping the defensiveness is a learned skill, I think. It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. Well, and I would add to that, another reason why I see the wall go up is it's no secret, a lot of us addicts, we struggle with poor self-image.
Yeah.
So when we're confronted with our partner saying something like, hey, you did this and I didn't like it, there's a part of us that's almost like, you don't think I'm wonderful? And I know I say that with some humor, like there's a real serious wound there.
Yeah.
But it's also a reality, like, sorry, I'm on the potty stuff. Everybody's poop stinks. So when somebody gives you feedback like, hey, that sucked, or I didn't like that, or that wasn't awesome of you, you really have to work on the part of you that is shocked that someone would think that, because that's a fantasy. Like, of course you're not everybody's favorite flavor, and sometimes the person you love most in the world can't stand you. That's part of reality, and it does not have to be a mortal wound to your ego.
But as an addict, I mean, still to this day, my primary core belief is if you know the real me, if you really know what's going on, you will not be able to get away from me fast enough. You will be out of the room so fast, your head will spin. So of course I get defensive. Of course I hide. Of course, we have to, the long-term healing for addicts is breaking through those wounds. Really, once I recognize, oh, that thing that tells me everybody's going to run away from me is crap. It's a lie.
I discovered that the relationships and the deep bonds that I had were even sweeter and felt more secure when someone did know everything about me and they stayed, that I gave them the chance to know everything and stay.
Yeah. One of the best days of my recovery is I'm in AA and SAA, active in both programs, and I have some really close friends in AA, and I invited them over one morning and I gave them my SAA fifth step because I wanted them to know all of it. And I was afraid I was going to lose friends. I was really afraid I was going to lose some of my friends. And they all were like, oh, I did some of that. Oh, I need this program. And, just a little bit of discussion. And somebody said, I'm hungry. Where are we going to go to lunch? and away we went to lunch. And I was like, oh my God. And I've been so much closer to those guys ever since. And we all opened up a lot, over the course of all of our secrets, anything came out because it was okay. And those relationships are so much more valuable to me now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
This is thank you both. You're very welcome. I had I asked the mini wife question. I guess to be more specific on the empathy, I see him have empathy for her, so I know he's capable of it. Is he punishing me with the lack of empathy? I don't understand why he does this.
Yeah, it could be. And in a perfect therapy world, in a couple session, you would be able to bring that up and ask that, and he would say, yeah, what is that about? Why do I do that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you have more experience with this than I do, John, but in my experience, it's 99 times out of 100, I don't have empathy for you because I don't have empathy for me. I'm afraid of feelings. The feelings of a 6-year-old kid are not scary.
Yeah.
The feelings of my adult partner are scary.
Totally. And to further that idea of I don't have it for myself, my empathy for myself may be as conditional or more than it is for you. So I always loved it when this is one of my favorite Stan Tatkin takeaways is he said, when I hear people say I don't know how, it often means I don't want to or I don't think I should have to. Yeah. And that's the place to explore is why don't I use that here? And again, that gets into some of the bigger things we talked about. If there's a sense of justice, well, you deserve it. Okay, well, who made you executioner? Is that a good place to come from? If it's I don't care for you and I don't want to give this to you. Okay, well, a different conversation needs to be had about our relationship then. But that's to give you a peek behind the curtain, when I'm working with couples, I always try to catch them doing things that they say they couldn't do, that I then get to say, all right, no more excuses. I've seen this happen. You can do it. Now we have to get to why you don't feel like you should have to or why you don't want to.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here, and that's the last question we had, but how can she approach her husband, and what is the conversation like? I'd really like to discuss this. Can we go to therapy and discuss this? And if he's not sober, is he ready to discuss this? I mean, when in his process is he ready to discuss this?
Well, the leveraging someone into deeper healing, like I've never seen two stories that are the same. So waiting for somebody to come around or recognize that they have a problem, like sometimes that'll never come. Sometimes the right application of pain or recognition, like it turns on a light bulb, and this certainly could be one of those. I might lead with something like, I always use pet names when I think of this because pet names are very disarming. Sweetie, I've noticed how you treat your daughter when she's upset, and I actually really love that side of you. I think you're a good listener, and I think you're really empathetic, and I there's a big part of me that really likes saying that. And there's another part of me that is really hurt and confused because I don't feel like you can bring that energy to our relationship. And I'd really like that. I'd really like to benefit from that. And I think you would like being able to give that too. Would you be willing to work with me to figure out what's going on there? What's the blockage? That kind of direct but gentle invitation, I think is some of the best ways to go. If you're at the point where it's ultimatum time, I need you to figure this out, or we need to get to a better place. And I've got 6 months before I can't do this anymore. There's all sorts along that spectrum that I'd invite you to consider, but a first attempt with leading with gentleness and generosity and curiosity, and call it the soft startup with your partner. That's generally a good first place to start.
Excellent. I like that a lot. Yeah. And one of the things what I've learned when I make requests is say what my need is or what my feeling is. Try to explain, this would make me happy. Here's why. This makes me unhappy. Here's why. So yeah. I always, when I teach about boundaries, I'm like, look, you got to say, when you do this, it causes me to feel this. And, what I would like is this, but if you continue the old behavior, here's how I will respond. But, it all hinges on when you do this, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
And, as an addict, if I know I'm hurting you, it makes it A, harder for me to continue that behavior, and B, easier to at least accept or understand your boundary, whether I like it or not. So anyway, we're out of time. Cool topic today, Jon. I like it. Thank you everybody for great questions. Thank you everyone for being here. We will be back the second week in November, but again, not on Thanksgiving. So we'll see you once next month. Have a lovely afternoon, evening, whatever it is for you, everyone, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks. See ya.